a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Right now, we are catching up with Mandy Worby, who will be sharing with us about what's happening in the Middle East with breaking Israel news. Welcome, Mandy.
Hello, Tosh. It's nice to be in the studio with you.
It's always good to see you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Tell us what's been happening over there in the Middle East.
Well, I'll start actually just by doing a bit of an update. I talked a couple of weeks ago with Neil about there was the strike on the NASA hospital, and I said I'd give an update. I wasn't here last week because I was in Canberra. But I have since found out that what happened is that there were 5 journalists killed in the strike and around about 15 civilians in the hospital, okay, because Israel came out and said it was a terrible error. But what I found out was the reason for the strike in the first place was that every one of those journalists, press people, were actually members of Hamas. Now, they shouldn't have actually been in the hospital at all because that is breach of the rules of international law, of war, the rules of war.
Beggars belief.
Yeah, and so the fact that they went into the hospital actually, according to the rules, the international rules of war, made the hospital a target, right? That's what happens. Now, the error came in that the press were in one particular section, and what Israel was supposed to do or had meant to do was send in a drone to that particular section, would have just dealt with the terrorists. However, they used the wrong, I don't even know what it was that they used, a rocket or something, and it actually had too big a destruction and it killed innocents as well. So that's where the error was, and Israel was very remorseful over it. But the strike wasn't illegal or wrong, but what they used was wrong. The method they used was wrong. So that was the problem.
It's the collateral of war, isn't it?
Oh, look, war is a terrible thing. Yeah. It is a terrible, terrible thing. And Israel didn't start this one at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
And after that with the NASA hospital, there's another flotilla, is this correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The first flotilla, that's the one with, I don't even want to mention a name. I don't want to give her persona any oxygen. Yeah. But yes, the first one failed. They're trying to break the blockade. So let me just give you a little bit of background on this blockade. All right. Decades ago, Hamas declared war on Israel and that it was a perpetual war. Now, when that happens, under the rules of war internationally, Israel is legally allowed to enforce a blockade, a naval blockade, to prevent terrorists or munitions from being smuggled into Gaza to use against Israel.
Sure.
So the blockade is legal. Yeah. And so if somebody comes in and tries to break that blockade, Israel has the legal right to attack if they want to, okay?
Sure.
So the first one failed, okay? The ship was taken, and all of the people within that first flotilla, they were taken from the vessel, they were fed, they were given drink, they were checked medically, and then they were deported. Okay. They weren't abused and they weren't kidnapped, as was the accusation.
And they weren't imprisoned by the sound of it for a long time.
Well, the next flotilla there is now with more vessels. It's on its way. Now, what happened is that Israel has already warned them, if you try to break this blockade again, we are going to imprison you and we will then confiscate your vessels and we will use them for our own security purposes. Now, the vessels have actually they were just going past Tunisia.
Right.
And they're saying that Israel sent a drone to attack the main vessel and it started a fire. Now, Israel has said nothing at all. If they had done it, they would have said so. But they've pulled into Tunisia, and the Tunisian authorities have said there is no evidence at all of any drone being used at all, because they would be able to see it in their satellites and their radars and stuff like that. There's nothing. So they've pulled into Tunisia, and it's very likely that what they've done is they've either done something and started a fire on their own vessel, or something's malfunctioned. And it's an opportunity to blame Israel, which is, what can I say, that's usually typical. But Israel didn't do anything. They're in Tunisia at the moment. Yeah,
it's the war of words that surround the actual happenings, eh?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And so going on from the flotilla, there's big news around Israel took out a senior Hamas leader.
5 of them, apparently.
Oh, 5 of them?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because they've taken out the majority of the leaders from Iran. They've taken out the majority of nearly all the leaders of Hezbollah. They've already taken out lots from Hamas. But yes, there was a very strategic, deliberate strike in Doha, in Qatar, all right, because what happened was there was another terrorist attack in Ramot, a suburb of Jerusalem. Israel's just, they've had enough. It was two Hamas terrorists who did it. And Qatar is it's only second to Iran being the world's leading sponsors of terrorism. They've been harbouring, funding, supporting, encouraging Hamas leaders for decades. And so a very specific strike took place in Doha, and it's taken out 5 Hamas leaders. Now, the US knew about the strike, and they informed the Qataris that it was coming. The White House released a statement about it. The Qataris are saying that they were only warned 10 minutes after the attack took place. And the US is saying otherwise. Now, the Prime Minister's office in Israel has made a statement, and they said regarding this attack, today's action against the top terrorist chieftains of Hamas was a wholly independent Israeli operation. Israel initiated it, Israel conducted it, and Israel takes full responsibility.
Okay.
Now, Israel, if they do something, they will tell you they've done something. If they haven't done it, they're not going to admit to it because they didn't do it, okay?
Sure.
Like drone strikes on civilian ships, they didn't do it. Now, my personal opinion on this, and this is just my personal opinion, is that the US did forewarn the Qataris and gave them plenty of notice, but the Qataris can't admit it because to admit that would be to say they willingly allowed for the Hamas leaders to be taken out on their soil, and that would be bad PR for them within the Muslim world. Yeah. So they've come out and said, no, it was bad on America's part. They didn't tell us until after it had happened and we knew nothing about it. But we're still going to continue in our mediation and all the rest of it and be friends with the US. So I think they're just trying to save face. But again, that's just my opinion. That's just what I think, my point of view. But 5 Hamas leaders are gone. I can't give you the names of them yet because there's conflicting reports at the moment about who.
Early days.
But 5 big names are gone now.
And there's been a ceasefire in Gaza and a ground offensive happening?
Well, there hasn't been one. They're trying to negotiate for one.
Oh, okay.
So the talks are ongoing about a ceasefire deal, but every time a national leader somewhere around the world says, we're going to recognise a Palestinian state, Hamas walks away from the negotiating table because they think if we just hang on for a little while, get a few more recognitions from a few more big nations, and we'll just get miraculously what we want. But there have been many nations around the world who recognised a Palestinian state years ago, and it didn't make a Palestinian state magically appear. Just saying it doesn't make it appear. There's so much more to it than that. It's a silly thing to do. But what it does do when you say that, when they make these statements, they're rewarding the terrorists for their behaviour. The terrorists dig in a little bit longer. The ceasefire negotiations break down and the war prolongs and the suffering prolongs. And no other nation has the right to enforce and impose on another sovereign nation that they have to chop their nation in half. You can't do that. That's not the way it works. It would be like the United Nations saying that Australia has to chop itself down the middle and have one Indigenous half and then a Western half. You can't do that. The same with, you can't say the South Island is for the Maoris in New Zealand and the North Island is for the others. No other nation can force that on another nation. You can't do it.
Absolutely. And what's happening on the inside of Gaza at the moment?
Okay, so when Israel has taken ground in Gaza and they've driven Hamas out of an area, they're now securing it to make sure that Hamas doesn't come and dig in again. And there's only what they believe is only one major stronghold now, and that's Gaza City. They're still firing rockets. Hamas is still firing rockets, not like they were, but they are. And Israel is still fending off missile attacks from Yemen as well. And Hezbollah are still digging in the south of Lebanon, so they're still taking out the infrastructure there. But what's happening is that because they believe that Gaza City is the last final stronghold of Hamas, and it's underground, all the buildings, you know, they come up in tunnels inside the buildings.
That's right.
You know, civilian buildings, and that's what makes them targets. They're dug in underneath these civilian buildings. So now what they've done is Israel has issued its biggest yet evacuation notice for the entirety of Gaza City to get all the civilians to safe areas, and then Israel is going to go in. The hope is to finally dig Hamas out. Finally, that's the hope. But it's a big offensive. Now,
will we be talking about ground troops there?
You're talking everything.
Everything.
Yes, you're talking everything. It's a massive. Now, The actual outworkings of it, I don't know, because Israel's not going to give away its strategies, of course, but it's going to be a massive thing. In the meantime, there's still negotiations for a ceasefire. They're still working towards that, but that's the offensive at the moment.
That's amazing. And what's on the horizon? Is there any news breaking about what's coming up soon for Israel?
Well, again, I just said that the negotiations are still ongoing, and Steve Witkoff, he is the US envoy. He's been talking to the Qataris, and I mean, it's very unlikely that this is going to actually succeed. Okay, they're still working on it, but Steve Witkoff doesn't believe it's going to be successful. And then there's an Israeli official, he actually said that Hamas won't give up all the hostages right at the start. It's simply unrealistic. The only question we're currently asking ourselves is whether this dialogue will lead to another round of talks. It's just talk, because Hamas keeps walking away. A Hamas representative apparently spoke to somebody at the Saudi Ashaq al-Awsat newspaper. That's not easy to say, I'm just saying. I just want to point that out.
You did very well.
And in that particular newspaper, the Hamas source is quoted as saying many traps and pitfalls that need to be dismantled. This is about the agreement. The ceasefire agreement, so that the agreement includes fair conditions that meet the demands of all sides, especially ending the war, which remains a central issue for Hamas and Palestinian factions. That's all the terror groups. Now, here's the problem. If you know anything about the Hamas charter, the charter is uncompromising that it will accept nothing less. It will never be satisfied until Israel is completely wiped off the map. How is Israel supposed to compromise with that? How you can't compromise with that, all right? So there's not going to be the chances of a negotiation or a ceasefire coming to fruition is very slim. Donald Trump is pushing for this; he really wants it, but he actually made a statement that says everyone wants the hostages home. Everyone wants this war to end. It is time for Hamas to accept my terms as well. I have warned Hamas about the consequences of not accepting. This is my last warning. There will not be another one. Israel has agreed to whatever this negotiation is. Hamas is saying, no, there are too many obstacles. So we're not holding out hope, but we're kind of still hanging on to that, you know?
Yeah, let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem and all Israel.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Mandy Worby, for bringing us up to speed with what's happening in Israel at the moment.
My pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.